All right, we are live. I'm going to let a few people trickle in, let the notifications go out, and once we get people in here, we're going to talk about unschooling, we're going to talk about a classical education, lawn creations, thanks you for joining, the blanket shop, Mads REA, thank you for joining, happy to have you guys here. We have an exciting show today. We're going to talk about unschooling, we're going to talk about classical education, and then address a few more things that my trolls brought up and I just can't help but addressing. But I'm doing this live on TikTok. I'm also going to record it, post it on YouTube, so we'll get into it. But before we get into classical education, which is misunderstood by so many people, right? That's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. It's what's taught at the elite private schools to the children of politicians and very wealthy, influential people. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what it is and how you can learn about it and implement it in your homeschool. And as I always tell parents, they ask me, Brett, what is the best method of educating a child? Is it unschooling? Is it classical education, Montessori, Charlotte Mason? Well, me, personally, I implement a combination of all of these methods. And when you set up your homeschool, you should really work to understand them and then do something that works for your child, their learning style, your teaching style, and your family. So I have severe trauma. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. So just as a quick recap, for anyone that just got into homeschool, and I'm going to try to get through this, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm interactive. You have access to me. But if you are new to homeschool and you just started, what is the first thing that you should do? Familiarize yourself with your responsibility as a parent record keeper. So if you haven't done it already and you're new to homeschool, you go to HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, locate the state that you live in, and find out what the regulations are in that state. Do you have to have a GED? Do you have to have a high school diploma? Is your child required to take an annual state test, right? That's information you need to know. Now, we could talk about exemptions and getting out of that, but you have to make sure that you dot your I's, cross your T's, because I don't want any of you to run into a situation where, one, maybe a government official knocks on your door and you need to show them proof that you've been doing schooling with your child so that they can't make any claims against you. So that's why this record keeping stuff is very important. Maybe 2 years from now you want to put your child back in public school, right? Well, you need records. You can't just say my child's in 8th grade. You need to show that your child has been receiving schooling up into the 8th grade level. And of course, later on, if your child decides they want to apply to college, again, I always say the goal, and we'll talk about this with unschooling, the goal is for them not to go to college. The goal is for them to be entrepreneurs and have real world experience and start their own business. But if they do decide they want to go to college, hopefully not for gender studies, hopefully for something like becoming a mechanical engineer, a biochemist, something that actually has monetary and real world value, then the record keeping aspect makes it so that they are able to do that. So last week we talked a little bit about unschooling. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, and then we're going to contrast that with parents' rights. Yes, thank you for being here. We're going to contrast that with a classical education, the classical trivium of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. What is it? How do we learn about it? Why are children taught this mythology at the elite private schools? And I know, Brett, you always talk about critical thinking. Well, doesn't that focus on memorization? I'm going to explain why a classical education actually does prioritize critical thinking so that one, your child can read and understand literature, two, can understand arguments, and three, it gives children the ability to formulate their own arguments and transfer their knowledge from themselves to other people. And once you can transfer what you know to other people, then it becomes wisdom, and that's how your children learn to win over a room. And that has so many applications in real life, whether it's at work with a boardroom. So you have a YouTube. I'm trying to learn more about unschooling. Well, I'm going to talk about unschooling right now. But yes, my YouTube page is Classical Learner. So if you guys want to jump over there, I'll be posting more and more videos to that long form. So unschooling is basically the philosophy of following the interest of your child. And people do this to varying degrees. Some people 100% will follow the interest of their child, and if that child's not interested in learning about math or science, they won't make them do it. Me personally, I do believe in some degrees of compulsion in getting your child to learn about certain topics, but as a general philosophy, you want to follow the interest of your child. And let me give you an example. I did a parent consultation with a family recently who had an amazing 5-year-old boy who looked up to his father and was really interested in construction. Any new books coming out? Yes, I have a book coming out on nutrition in, I think, December, and a book coming out on the dangers of accepting free things and how it creates a society of dependence. Coming out in November. So I have 2 books coming out, very excited about that. But yeah, back to the unschooling, now the shameless plug of my book. So I worked with this family, parent consultations I do. This child's amazing, 5 years old, can do real stuff with construction. So I said, you know what, don't fight that at all. And I showed the family some resources designed to teach little children about construction. And we actually got this child to the point where he was building functional benches. So the plan we formulated was to follow his interest. That's what he wants to do. That's fine. He wants to build benches. Was to guide him, right? With unschooling, you're really a guide. To guide that child to make a free bench and donate it to the local church. And then put flyers in the church, and the church is getting this free bench, and of course they're excited to help this child, right? If it's a good church. So to put flyers up that this child made this bench, and he can do something similar to that for you as well. And with that, this 5-year-old child, essentially, I mean, it's not very formal, started his own little business, right? And he's learning about the value of doing things for free, that money's not the only currency, right? Because you do that for the church, and then the church wants to do something for you. People see what you have done, then they like your work and they want to hire you. So this 5-year-old had actually started a little business where people could hire him to build them custom benches or chairs. And to think about that, to put that in perspective, it really shows the power of unschooling. And the most important thing that it does, beyond the skill of building the bench, beyond the experience of doing some basic marketing, some basic sales, it creates a mindset in that child. So what is that child going to do when he's 10 years old, when he's 15 years old, and we've greatly expanded his skill set through following his interest, right? Because it starts with building a bench, but from there it could be building a table, putting up a shed with dad in the backyard, maybe building an actual deck on the house as an extension. There are so many things that child can do and skills he can develop. And if he has an entrepreneurial mindset, well, over time that really starts to pay dividends. So it's such an important thing to do. So that would be unschooling. So how does that compare with a classical education? And again, this is an education that John Taylor Gatto, legendary teacher, New York City, 1988, 89, 90, was the New York City Teacher of the Year before he abruptly resigned, and he took out an article in New York Times, said, I just can't do this to students anymore. The public school system is basically, he said, designed to dumb down children and to create a society of what he called an obedient worker class. And he went on to study the elite private schools in the country, and he found that in these elite private schools, children were taught the classical trivium of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So basically, education is broken down into three phases. Grammar, which is the memorization phase. And this is where people get confused and say, well, how can you be teaching critical thinking during the memorization phase? And I'll get into that. Just give me a second. Grammar is the memorization phase. Logic is the logic phase, which really gets into the critical thinking, right? If A, then B, then C. Basic introduction to logic. Are there any contradictions within something that you're reading? Well, logical contradictions within an argument that you're hearing, within your own thought process. So it's teaching children to formulate their arguments in a way, right, that there are no logical contradictions, something God knows a lot of America needs. So grammar is the first stage, logic is the second stage, and rhetoric is the third stage. And this is the part that most people don't understand. Rhetoric. And I always tell people, like, when you go on Facebook or social media or whatever it might be, and you start having a political debate, and you're making your talking points and you're being logical, and the person you might be having a conversation with or maybe an argument with, I don't do any of this. If a person has a problem with my argument, I don't care. But you're having this conversation and the person that you're in the debate with completely disregards your perfectly logical point and will write some incoherent nonsense back to you. Completely illogical, contradicts itself. Well, I always tell people, don't bring logic to a rhetoric fight. So the children at these elite public schools are taught rhetoric, and this is the art of winning a crowd. And I'm going to give you two examples. They're political examples, so don't hate me. I'll give one left-wing political example and one right-wing political example of how rhetoric can be utilized, and you'll see why the children of politicians are taught this. It's very tactful. It's an effective way of communicating and tapping into the preconceived notions and the emotions of your target audience. So again, I'm going to give one left-wing rhetorical play, which is very impressive, and one right-wing rhetorical play, which is very impressive. So every 4 years, when a politician runs for office, right, on the right wing of the political spectrum, on the Republican side, the politicians will run on border security, right? They'll say, we need to secure the southern border. So when Donald Trump ran for office, what did he say? What did Trump say? And again, I'm explaining this so that people could understand rhetoric with an example of something that we're all familiar with. So when Trump ran for political office, he didn't say we're going to secure the southern border. He said, we are going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. And it's a powerful rhetorical message because unlike the other Republicans who are saying, yes, we'll secure the border, when you hear we are going to build a wall, people can visualize, right, in their head, a wall on the southern border. And that visualization that the rhetoric creates is, it better communicates a message, right? So this is the form of rhetoric, and this is what politicians use all the time. And let me give you a left-wing example. So when Barack Obama would talk about Donald Trump, right, he would very effectively, Obama and Trump are both great rhetoricians. And again, anyone who can't see anyone who can't see past the political side of that, well, I can't help it, people are emotional. But both Obama and Trump are phenomenal at rhetoric, and this is that classical trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So when Obama would talk about Trump, he wouldn't say Trump supports white supremacy, right? He would say something like, how hard is it to say you're against white supremacy? How hard is it to condemn white supremacy? And by doing that, he is implying, without saying it, right, in the listener's mind, you think, yeah, how hard is it to condemn white supremacy? But he didn't actually say that. It is a rhetorical question, right, that implants a thought or creates a picture in the mind of the listener. So the classical education is that. It is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Now, back to the grammar, that first stage, that early childhood grammar, which we are told is memorization, right? How can memorization be critical thinking? My mind's going to explode. Well, the classical, and I'll give you a few books that you could read that teach this if you want to implement it to your child, if you want to implement it for your children. So, in the classical trivium, the memorization phase, grammar is about teaching the importance of defining terms to children. And I'm going to give you an example now about defining terms and how it's so important. So one of the argument, and this is why you want your children to understand this, and this is why it actually is critical thinking. One of the things we'll see talked about on the mainstream news, and I'm going to talk in a hobo code because I'm trying not to use certain key terms, but it's something, again, you're all familiar with, so it's something I can convey, I can teach using something that you're already familiar with. So right now, with there's a certain procedure that the authorities that be want people to get, right? And they use this statistic or that statistic, right? They say that they'll say people that have gotten this procedure are less likely to get sick, right? Once they've gotten it. Well, that is a powerful argument because you're saying, oh, they have the statistics, right? But if you know that you have to make your opponent or the person who's speaking to you first define their terms, you'd say, okay, well, how do you define people that have, how do you define vaccinated versus unvaccinated, right? That's what I'm getting at. So if you look at their definitions, they actually recently changed the definition. So a person that has only gotten the first you-know-what is considered not. And even a person that has gotten the first and their second you-know-what for 2 weeks after they've gotten that procedure, they're considered not vaccinated, right? So then you look at that and you say, okay, well, I understand your statistics, but that's kind of manipulative, right? Well, if you understand that you have to make someone define their terms, right? You'd say, okay, well, they'd say, oh, well, I would say to them, okay, well, how do you define vaccinated versus unvaccinated? And then you say, okay, well, based on your definition, I don't know if it has a lot of validity, right? But so many people are unaware that they need to do that they just say, oh, well, it's the statistics. It's the statistics. Well, because they don't understand, you have to make your opposition define their terms at the onset of any argument. So then once you know how to do that, right, this is why you learn this first. Because now you're thinking critically. So when someone makes an argument to you, you say, okay, well, what do these words actually mean? Can you define your terms? Because if you don't get them to define their terms, how can you know if an argument is actually logical or illogical, right? I have these statistics, and they say that people that are vaccinated are less likely to get sick. That seems logical. But once I make them define the term, well, what's your definition of vaccinated? Well, now you say, oh, okay, well, now the logic doesn't quite add up because you're saying this person, Johnny down the street got both shots and then got sick, and he counts as unvaccinated. So you see the distinction, right? So this is why the classical education actually does teach critical thinking. So it's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And remember, I always tell people, do not bring logic to a rhetoric fight. In fact, I'm probably bringing logic to a rhetoric fight right now. Statistics were, when I was in school, Science said, yeah. I mean, I don't want to get into all that because I've already used so many key terms that people are not supposed to use. Did you guys see the study? One of these mainstream publications came out with a new study that said, a study has found that conspiracy theorists are not critical thinkers. So it's like, oh, so let me get this straight. People who question official narratives are not critical thinkers, and people who blindly accept official narratives are critical thinkers. Anyway, by the way, I would love for all of you to become members of my private homeschooling community. It goes without saying. Anyone who joins my private homeschool community, you could use the promo code CONNECT. It's $10 a month, and once you get in there, I will personally inbox you and assist you to look through everything and structure your child's education. And if you guys have any questions about anything related to what I'm talking about education in general, about your child, you have me right now, so feel free to chime in. Now, 2 books, I told you I'd give you 2 books, that any parent interested in a classical education should read are The Lost Tools of Learning by Dorothy Sayers. Easy read, 35 pages, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, what it is, why it's important. You read those 35 pages, you understand the importance of it and how it's structured. And then, after that, I would read The Well-Trained Mind. And The Well-Trained Mind is written by a parent, and it actually goes through how to implement a classical education, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, in your homeschool. I may need it if my son's school tries to force the you-know-what. Yeah, well, so many of these things are... Is there any high school curriculum? I'll get back to that in a minute. So many of these things are a blessing because I see all these families pulling their children out of public school, and as a teacher, right, as someone who came through, I have a bachelor's degree in history education, which is where I learned to do all that research and that critical thinking that, makes me, that conspiracy theorist that makes me not a critical thinker. Yeah, I mean, I have a bachelor's degree in history education, a master's degree in birth to 2 special education, and I came through the system and I saw what the system does to children because it prioritizes memorization over critical thinking, and not the type of memorization I just talked about, that this event happened on this date in history. And if you can say that the Civil War was fought in 18 blah, 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 right? Or the American Revolution in 1776, right? If you can regurgitate that information, then they tell you that you are educated, that you know history. But the truth is you don't know anything, right? You have memorized a piece of information and you've accepted it in your mind as factual information. But the only way you can really know if something's accurate is if you go through the data, you go through the primary sources for yourself, you ask questions, you use your logic to see if there's any contradictions, and you form your own unique understanding of the world. And that's not what the public schooling system is doing. And that's why so many people, they graduate at high school at 18 years old. They have no idea what they want to do in the world. They've been told their whole life, the only thing you can do to be successful is you have to take on debt and you have to go to college. And then they don't even declare majors because they don't know what they want to do. 4 years later, they graduate with $100,000 in debt and a piece of paper that says they could work for a corporation. But even then, because most of their studies are like gender studies, they don't have any actual skills. Whereas if we were educating these children the right way, skills should be prioritized in early childhood. Like, that's when I say that, oh, cool, I get notifications, so I saw someone just join my private homeschool community. If you're listening to this right now, I will inbox you after this stream is over and we'll get you all set up. But early childhood education should focus on skills. Construction, as we talked about in the beginning of this, I worked with a 5-year-old child. He made a bench for his church, donated it to his church, right? And then they put up a flyer and said, if you want to hire this child, he can make you a bench too. And people in the community love that stuff, right? They hire children because they want to support something good, right? So focus on skills over subject matter in early childhood education, whether that be photography, videography, construction, engineering, just any skill, computer coding, because you can take those skills and you can use it to get your children real world business experience, so that they can do just amazing, amazing things in the world. And let me just see here. Right, using your intuition with the knowledge you sought out for. Where you got to get your book printed out. Yeah, so that's another interesting question. So right now, my books are currently printed through Amazon KDP, which I actually don't love, because anyone who follows me knows that I am a very, very, very big supporter of personal responsibility and supporting mom and pop shops. So like, when I go to the store, I'll actually spend more money at the store to buy something from a mom and pop shop rather than going to Walmart. Or many of you saw the video I posted yesterday, where I wouldn't go into Trader Joe's because they were enforcing a certain policy that involves your face that I don't support. And I don't break any laws. I don't advocate for breaking any laws. I never, ever would. But you vote every day with your dollar, right? So I wouldn't go into Trader Joe's because I'm not going to support that policy. Because when I hand them my money, what I'm telling them is that I'm okay with them treating their employees like second-class citizens. When you go to a restaurant that clearly mandates that all the restaurant workers cover up, right? You're telling them that I'm okay with you treating this person like they're in a caste system, right? Like I could show up and breathe my air. My air is better than your employee's air. I will not support a company that treats its people that way, and neither should you. So right now, yes, my books are printed through Amazon KDP because the way the printing process works is, coming up as a new author, I would have had to lay out tens of thousands of dollars to get my books published. Whereas through Amazon KDP, you could actually get them published for free. So economically, in this instance, right now, that's the right move for me. My books, I'm kind of a known author now. So my plan is to start talking to some publishing companies and see if I could work out a deal where I don't have to lay out tens of thousands. I want to write a book for kids too. You know what? I'll tell you what. If enough of you have interest in that, you can inbox me. Just let me know. I'll write that down right now. Process of writing books. And I will do an entire stream on how to write books and how to get your stuff published. And here's why I would do that. And here's why it's so important. And then could you remind me? I want to get back to the Trader Joe's story. But we have to build, right? Like the people that bother us, the so-called controllers who are abusing the restaurant workers, who are abusing the workers at Trader Joe's, who are telling you that you're going to get fired if you don't do what they want to make you do, right? Like, they are constantly building, right? Whether they're doing it through economic takeover, right? Like, they control the banking system, they control the social media platforms, they control all of this. They control Hollywood and the television shows that our children watch. We need to give our children alternatives. So if you have an idea to write a children's book, write it and inbox me, and I'll help. I will literally help you on the process of how to write it, because if you write something good, that's entertainment for my child, so he doesn't have to watch the gross stuff that we see on television all the time. And I just couldn't think of anything that's more important. We have to build our own culture, which, by the way, my books and my private homeschool community, Homeschools Connected, which you can find the link in my profile. Even if you don't have children, I would say you should sign up and support what I'm doing, because I'm trying to show people there's alternative ways to educate their children, and I'm willing to help them do it, because the more people that grow up as free and critical thinkers with skills that aren't dependent on the system, the freer the world will be for my children when they grow up. Yes, I have a YouTube channel. It is Classical Learner on YouTube, and I will be posting some of these streams, as well as I'll be making other videos for that. You know, I talked about the Jabba Jabba Jing Dong, so I don't know if that will get my channel deleted, but whatever. I do homeschool online for my kids. Yeah, well, there's lots of good curriculums, Time for Learning, Abeka, and, you know, I hope you're doing, you know, start with those base curriculums, but you can do so much more than that just by following the interest of your children and showing children how smart and how special they are, because every child has unique creativity that is endowed on them by God. And if you just guide them and show them and channel them, I have seen firsthand the amazing things that children can do. And with a little bit of mindset development, before you know it, they will be free critical thinkers who do just amazing things in this world. So just getting back to that Trader Joe's story, because there is one more thing that was really grinding my gears that I just had to address with the trolls. So I posted a video yesterday, and I told a story about when I was in high school. And I had a good friend. I loved him. You know, we spent a lot of high school, you know, getting drunk and being stupid together. And by the way, I don't drink at all now. I'm not an alcoholic, but I don't drink because I try to set a culture in my home, and I don't want my children to grow up seeing their parents drink, because that makes them more likely to drink. So everything I do is about culture, mindset. And, you know, I want my son to grow up not seeing his dad getting drunk watching football games all the time. So as much as I enjoyed that when I was younger, it's not something I do anymore. Not judging you if you drink, not my thing. But I like people to know why I don't do that, because it's all about building a better culture for the children. And that's why I don't drink. My son doesn't see me drink, and lead by example. But yeah, my good friend, and we grew up drinking in high school, and I remember my mother, he would get into some bad things like drugs and stuff, and my mother asked me throughout high school, please stop hanging out with this crew. I know he's your good friend. I know you love all these, at the time, love these kids, but they're going down a bad path. And I kind of ignored my mother throughout high school. But by the time I had gotten to college, I heeded her warning. And I said, you know what? Mom's probably right. I've seen enough with people doing dumb things. She's probably right. And I distanced myself from that group. And, when they'd go out, I'd say, I'm not really into being in that scene anymore, right? That's not the scene for me. And my friend understood, and they understood. And it's not that I cut off contact. I wasn't like, hey, bud, I'll never talk to you again. We'd talk, but I just wasn't going out and being involved in that situation. And then, as it turns out, years later, so that was like 18, 19 years old. And when he was about 30 years old, he actually died of a cocaine overdose. And when I had heard that, it made me very thankful for my mother that she was trying to stand up to that she was telling me, say, this isn't the route you want to go. I know you like these people, but you should detach yourself from that situation. And I'm so thankful for that message. And then I did detach myself from that situation because, if you stay in those circles, it only takes one night to start doing something dumb. You get addicted, you fall into it, and before you know it, good people destroy their lives and die of a drug overdose. So I posted that. I felt good about posting that. And then, of course, some of the trolls came in and proceeded to blame me for my friend's death, saying that if I would have just continued to hang out with him and stayed in his life, that then I could have stopped him from dying of a drug overdose. And what a horrific thing to say to someone about a situation you know nothing about. And for anyone who knows anything about addiction, it's actually the enablers that do that. So by me saying that I won't be a part of that I won't hang out with you when you're doing drugs, if you go to like a rehab center and ask them how you're supposed to handle it, that's actually the proper way. And it's the people that are going out with him and doing drugs, right, that are the enablers that don't do any justice for people in those situations. So I did want to address that just because the gall of some people. Now, believe me, I'm like Dikembe Mutombo out here. You know, they go up, the troll comes in, he says something negative to me, blocked. No, 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 try again. See you later. You know, I have no time for that, but I did want to address that. So, all right, guys, this has been fun. If there's anything you want me to cover, you know, any topics, inbox me, because I'm going to be doing this every day at 12 o'clock. Tell your friends about me. I'll post this on YouTube so that if you want, I'll post it like tomorrow, and then you could share it if you want. Hearts, likes, thumbs up, all of that helps me. I really appreciate you helping me spread my message, because it's a message of personal responsibility. It's a message of doing the right thing, building a better culture, and that no one can take our freedom from us. Freedom isn't free, and we could earn it every single day of our lives. Again, my homeschool community, Homeschools Connected, link in the profile. What's the page where I can buy your books on your website? So if you go to my TikTok profile, I have the direct link on that profile to each individual book. So just go to my TikTok profile, click on that link. It pulls up all my books, and you could click on them one by one. Cubs to Bears, Free Speech, The Right to Bear Arms, Operation Mockingbird, about fake news, The Bear from Jekyll Island, which is about the banking system, which is very important to teach children about, and Good Bears always tell the truth. All right, guys, this has been a lot of fun. Anything you want me to talk about, let me know. I'll be back tomorrow, 12 noon, and we will do it again. God bless you, and freedom isn't free, so earn it every day.